Methodically, a scourge spreads across the surface of Terraria. Not an evil creep or the blood of a cosmic horror, but the insidious will of an overwhelming light. Where most see evil as their enemy, they forget that a balance must be forever maintained, and that too much light without darkness to temper it will inevitably incinerate everything in its path.
Hello, my honey. Hello, my rack.
Before the birth of Terraria, cosmic deities of untold power roamed throughout the universe, creating and destroying as they saw fit. To them, existence was merely a plaything that they used for their own amusement. Frequently, though, struggles arose between the great beings, unwilling to accept each other's ways. By their very nature, they were incompatible, yet intrinsically linked to each other's survival. One was the light, all things good and meaningful, and the other was the dark, pure evil, existing only to destroy. Even though they were mirror opposites of each other, in the end, they were much the same. If too much of one or the other existed, then chaos was soon to follow. After eons of unrelenting conflict, it was finally decided that a victor would not emerge, and that a new tactic must be formulated. To this end, seeds of both light and dark were planted on certain primordial planets. Seeds that would develop and silently combat each other, until finally one won out against the other. One of these planets was, of course, Terraria. Little was a third party expected to interfere though, an unfeeling force of indifference and incomprehensible power from beyond the furthest stars. Once in place, the seeds of good and evil immediately sought out their ideal environments. Evil burrowed to the very centre of the planet, while good was much more insidious. It wormed its way into the hearts and minds of the people of Terraria, drove them to do what was right against the more directed evil influence of the world, and thus the balance was struck, and purity spread across the planet. A fragile stability of light and dark. Then they came. The cosmic horrors, spreading their own influence across Terraria, and eventually going so far as to bind the power of light and night so that they could consume the world without further hindrance. One day though, the axe of the eldritch gods would be undone, and the true forces would explode back into the world. But this time they were disorganized, uncontrolled, and sought to complete their original mandate in any way possible. To this end, good concentrated its power and began aggressively assimilating the world, transforming it into some form of twisted fairy tale. The Hallow. Here the sun continually shined. Rainbows constantly hung in the air, and the various forms of life that got in its way were transformed into creatures of pure light. This was hardly a utopia, however. With the balance well and truly shattered, the hallowed creatures ran amok and tore through the land, converting the world into yet more hollow, and destroying anything in their path in their relentless quest to obliterate all that was not like them. Unlike other biomes that would eventually retreat if not constantly fueled by a source like an elder god, the Hallow was fed by a natural source of power embedded within Terraria that could never be defeated without causing irreparable damage to the world. The only option was to force it back into balance, merge it with the darkness to ensure that once again, only purity would exist on the surface of Terraria. But how could this be accomplished? There was little that could slow down, let alone stop the spread of the Hallow, and soon it would encompass all, at last meeting the darkness again in a final conflict. No one knew what would happen at that point, but it was safe to assume the outcome would not be favourable for Terraria. There were people, however, from far, far away, who also struggled with the spread of the Hallow. Unlike the rest of Terraria though, they had not completely succumbed to it, for they were an advanced people who had built a great city that harnessed the power of steam and clockwork. Using their technology, they had begun development on a device that would purge the Hallow and any other biome that threatened their city. But the device lacked one vital component, a material that would effectively purify the unwanted biomes. Unfortunately, the steampunkers were an isolated nation, having suffered at the hands of outsiders before, and they were unwilling to seek help elsewhere, despite their chemists continually failing to discover a solution. Even when word reached them of a great warrior who had fought back the cosmic terrors and purified the land, they were reluctant to send an envoy. Then, when stories came of the defeat of powerful mechanical beasts by that same warrior, one young scientist could not stand by idle anymore. Becoming convinced that this champion and their followers could help, not to mention overwhelmed by a desire to inspect the remains of the mechanical monsters, she took the prototype Contaminator and set off to meet the champion. Little was she expecting to find the Dryad assisting the champion, and for her to be the one who could ultimately solve their issues. The Dryad had had a long and unfavourable history with the steampunkers, but putting aside their differences, she explained that she possessed the essence of purity, but without a way to disseminate it into the world, it was all but useless. But with the Contaminator, they might yet stand a chance against the encroaching biomes. And so it was, with the steampunker remaining unable to rejoin her people for her crime of taking the prototype. The champion used the Dryad's essence to begin cleansing Terraria. Over time though, essences other than that of the purity started to be discovered, and it was then that it was realised just how powerful the steampunker's prototype was. It was no longer a tool to restore the world, but potentially a weapon both darkness or light could use for themselves to destroy the other and consume the world. Just when it was believed that salvation was at hand, the darkest chapter in Terraria's history may have just been beginning.